Greetings and welcome to the Grenfell MediaWatch update. Today's edition I want to call Burying Bad News. Now on this wet and windy day, where do I want to start? I think if we look at the top of last week, we officially saw the informal launch of the Tory campaign for the borough of Kensington and Chelsea. And why do I say that? Well, there was a so-called scandal reported in most of the media organisations and it didn't make much sense. This was the tale of the three Tories, the BBC, that's Bailey, Buttonlock and Cleverly, coming together to attack the Labour MP, an incumbent, Emma Cord, about some, now let's be clear, not Afrophobic, but pretty dumb comments that she made many years ago, where she referred to Bailey as some kind of token getter boy, which, let's be honest, that's pretty much what he was when he was working with Cameron. Now, I was quite puzzled as to why did this story receive so much column inches? It wasn't exactly the scandal of the year. And then one of our members pointed something out to me in the print edition of the Evening Standard. Now, you've got to remember, the Evening Standard, editor is George Gideon. Now, he may not be a fan of Theresa May, but he is a die-hard Tory. And they want the borough back. They don't like it in Labour hands. Now, if you look at the print edition of the Evening Standard, you'll see that right at the bottom of the so-called scandal, there's a little story that's buried in the last couple of sentences. You see that? Now, the Evening Standard isn't a newspaper, it's a free paper. It's given out and read to millions of Londoners every day, so therefore it's very, very influential. So this attempt to bury the news is something we've got to be mindful of. Now, in July, Met Commander Stuart Cundy said that we wouldn't be able to identify everybody. I believed him. When in July, Cressida Dick, the Met head, made a similar statement about we won't be able to identify everybody. Foolishly enough, I believed her too. And this is the problem. You see, there's not much I can add to the debate about the numbers that's not been mentioned last week. But it does raise a certain conundrum. If we can't trust the police to count and identify the dead, then how on earth can we trust the police to identify, prosecute the living who are responsible? You see, the police had come and said, this is the best we can do given the evidence, we will never know the exact figures, but this is all we can do right now. I'd have respected that. Even church ministers are saying pretty much the same thing. But it's the absolute certainty, this absolute belief that they know the figures and that 71 is the number. This is why we can't trust them. So with all that media focus on police figures, what news was buried? Well, the inquiry made a press release about its appointment of assessors, and these are the people who are going to help Morbic with the expertise to do the inquiry. We did a little bit of investigation. Nothing controversial at this stage, only one of the members having some kind of tenuous link to the New Orleans disaster, but nothing that we could really pin on them, which is actually a good thing, because hopefully these people will be independent. There's also some good news stories. Survivors were actually able to go back into the tower and retrieve some items. The Guardian did a nice piece in their weekend magazine supplement about living in the shadow of Grenfell. But there was a good reason why I called this Burying Bad News, and it wasn't just the audit. The death toll figures also had another side effect, because on Wednesday there was a piece of news that we should still be talking about now, which everyone seems to have forgotten. And this is the Dunmurry Tower fire that took place in Belfast. So picture that, 5 months after Grenfell, we have residents in a tower block. The fire's off in their building and they're unaware it's taking place because the fire alarms aren't going off. Now, if the fire hadn't taken place mid-Wednesday evening and it had been sort of like 3 o'clock in the morning, we'd have been looking at another Grenfell. We'd have been looking at another massacre. Thankfully, there were no fatalities. I think 3 people were treated in the hospital. But this is the story. This is the story that should be reported. Because you see, in Australia, they're making changes already. They just passed a new law. And this says that individuals who actually use banned products like flammable cladding will be culpable for fines up to $200,000. Why aren't British MPs championing this law? Why aren't they following suit? We just had the commemoration of the King's Cross massacre 30 years ago, where 31 people died. It's time to stop people hiding behind corporate shells and actually hit them as individuals as well. But I want to close on a positive note and reflect on the silent walk that took place last week. And what really made it special was actually the solidarity we had with the firefighters who came and stood their ground with us. And so whilst the firefighters have decided to stand beside us, the police do appear to have picked a side. That is of the state, their property, and the wealthy 1% that rob us every single day. Now, the Dunmurry Tower fire could have been an absolute disaster, a complete massacre like Grenfell. And for me, that is the real news story of last week. In the attempt to bury bad news, they hoped that we'd forget about that. We'd forget about the changes in law in Australia, but we haven't, and we're watching you. So I'm going to close this ever and say, may the ancestors continue to guide and protect us. Ashe.